Hello, this is Mrs. Hall with our digital lecture. Today I'll be covering Chapter 14, Lesson 2. Your guiding questions are: how did a new political party affect the challenges of slavery? Why was the Dred Scott case important? And how did Abraham Lincoln and Stephen A. Douglas play a role in the challenges to slavery? Key words: territory, Whigs, Republican, popular sovereignty. In 1854, the Republican Party formed, and its uniting issue was banning slavery in new territories. What happened is that anti-slavery folks came together from various different parties. So you had Whigs, Democrats, Free Soilers that joined together under the umbrella of the Republican Party. So something that you need to consider is that Democrats and Republicans as a party today are very different than Democrats and Republicans of the Civil War era. So Republicans initially were in favor of larger federal government, meaning more government involvement. In our modern day, our Democrats are more in favor of a larger federal government. Think of providing more social services, and that's what the Democrats are very much associated with. So the roles and position of those parties has very much switched. Another key concept that we see are the congressional elections of 1854, and you have the Republicans and Democrats facing off against each other. The outcome of the election is that Republicans win control of the House of Representatives and received a majority of their support in the North, and did not receive any support in the South. As a result of this election, Democrats saw some loss in support. So 3/4 of Democratic candidates lost in the North, and at that point they become a mostly Southern party. Your inquiry journal question is: why did the Democrats lose almost 3/4 of their elections in free states? It was mainly because of the issue that we talked at the opening of the lesson. So you had, again, anti-slavery advocates from the different parties, from Free Soilers, Whigs, Democratic Party, coming together and forming a brand new party. So they literally had a loss of party membership and a loss of support. And that would explain why Democrats did so poorly in the North. Now, moving on to the election of 1856. The presidential election of 1856 was divided along clear sectional lines. As you can see, Buchanan was strongly supported in the South and Middle states, and Republican Fremont was supported mostly in northern states. And Fillmore, you see, did gain a few electoral votes, but not enough for it to really matter. But what does come out of this is what we see is that Democrats supported the idea of popular sovereignty, and popular sovereignty was one of the vocab words. It's useful to note that people living in the United States territories were not able to vote for presidential elections. So that was also one of your vocabulary words. So a territory is a land that belongs to a specific country, but they don't necessarily have all of the rights and privileges of a state. California would have benefited from all the privileges of having representatives and having government protections, but the territories didn't necessarily get that privilege until they established into an actual state themselves. Another inquiry journal question that you have is: what party was too badly damaged by the slavery issue to offer a candidate in the presidential election of 1856? That would have been the Whig Party. If you remember, they lost membership as their anti-slavery members had gone to join Democrats and Free Soilers to form the Republican Party. So the Whig Party is not able to offer a candidate for the election. Another question is: what is popular sovereignty, and why did the Democratic Party support it? So I didn't cover this in the last slide because I knew it was coming up here. So what is popular sovereignty? Popular sovereignty refers to giving the states the opportunity to vote for themselves whether to allow slavery or not. So it's a hands-off approach for the federal government, meaning the government is not going to get involved and decide. And if you remember from the previous compromises, the government had decided which states would be free, which states would allow slavery, and that slavery would not be permitted in certain territories or south of the 3630 latitude line. And so that was seen as government involvement. So popular sovereignty, remember, popular means belonging to the people, and sovereignty means power, so the power belonged to the people and therefore they get to choose. The Democrats supported this because it was an alternative to banning slavery outright. It meant that those states would be able to continue to use slavery, and it would give them more support in the South. Another significant issue that we see in this lesson is the Dred Scott decision. And the court case was called Dred Scott v. Sandford. So Dred Scott was an enslaved African American who sues for his freedom because in his lifetime he had moved to free territory. So he traveled to free territory with his owner. When his owner dies, Dred Scott sues to gain his freedom. The Supreme Court ruled that an enslaved person, Scott, had no right to sue, and therefore banning slavery would be unconstitutional, under the means that slaves are considered property, and under the protections of the Constitution, it is illegal to take away anybody's property. Southerners rallied behind this decision because for them, it meant that now they had a protection, or at least so they believed. Right? Anti-slavery groups were calling this a crime because they opposed the idea of slavery. Make sure that you take the time to come back and watch this video. It really breaks down the case itself. So since the Supreme Court decided that enslaved people were not citizens and therefore could not sue in court, Dred's case would not be able to hold up in any court at all. Your next inquiry question: what was the basis of the Supreme Court decision in the Dred Scott case that protected slavery as an institution and made it unconstitutional to outlaw? We see that the case hinged on defining an enslaved person as property, and in doing so, it supports the institution of slavery and makes it unconstitutional to outlaw slavery. In 1858, Abraham Lincoln and Democrat Stephen Douglas faced off in these famous debates as they're competing for the Illinois Senate race. And you've probably heard of presidential debates. You may have seen them on TV already. So the Lincoln-Douglas debates were so popular that they were held outdoors because of the large amount of people that were coming to listen to the debate. Abraham Lincoln and Stephen Douglas face off, and as a result of the debates, Lincoln corners Douglas into making a statement that would later hurt him. Lincoln does not win the Senate seat, but he does gain a reputation for himself that would later lead to him running for president in 1860. Your inquiry journal question is: how were the 1858 Lincoln-Douglas debates helpful to Abraham Lincoln? We kind of already answered that question. So Lincoln was a relatively unknown politician up to this point, but his strong performance and support for the abolition of slavery gained him attention and support that would later help him win the presidency. There is a link here. Make sure that you go back and you watch that. There's a short video just going over some concepts about the Lincoln-Douglas debate. In addition, Abraham Lincoln, in a sense, cornered Douglass into making a statement which was later dubbed the Freeport Doctrine, in which he stated that the right's ability to choose whether to allow slavery or not superseded the decision of the Supreme Court in the Dred Scott decision. That statement, however, would have upset. So this statement would damage Douglass's support in the South because what the Supreme Court had said meant that taking away slaves, aka property, as they had declared, would have been unconstitutional, therefore taking away the power from the states to decide for themselves. Another substantial happening was the raid on Harper's Ferry. John Brown was an abolitionist, and in his attempt of arming enslaved African Americans to start a revolt against slaveholders, he raided an arsenal. If you don't know what an arsenal is where the government stores weapons. So John Brown and his men attempt to steal these weapons. John Brown and his men are caught, and their raid is not successful, but this happening alerts Southerners to the potential of a slave uprising. John Brown himself was a controversial figure because of the nature of his attempts to free enslaved people. Think of other more peaceful attempts of freeing enslaved people, like the Underground Railroad. John Brown's death is seen as he gave his life as a martyr, meaning he gave his life for the cause. But for Southerners, he would have been seen as a terrorist because his actions were violent. When you get a moment, make sure that you watch the video as well. This is Mrs. Hall signing off. Thanks for tuning in.